I have a reading this morning from Vanessa Rush Southern, adapted. The piece I wrote for the April newsletter was a joke. It was an April Fool's column, so I really didn't mean that we would start having coffee hour at the nearby diner so we could evangelize, or that the women's group had had any awakenings, at least not the kind that merit changing their names to things like Eagle Soar and Hear Me Roar. Yet I found out that some folks took the observations at face value, and so I had some apologies to make. The experience taught me a lot about the power of humor and about humor's ability to strain the affections. Moreover, it left me wondering about something else. Whether we need to talk more in our communities about how we handle the unintended hurts and slights that we inevitably deal one another. The truth is, each one of us has things that hurt or annoy or embarrass us. With all our different backgrounds and experiences, unique genetic and emotional makeups, moved as we are by particular hopes and fears, it is inevitable that we will bump up against one another on occasion. Bumping up against one another can, however, be divine. It can shake us out of our self-centeredness, reminding us that we are not alone in this world. It can invite us into conversations that might not otherwise have taken place, and that opens up new worlds as a result. In this crazy bumper car world of community, there is order in the madness and God in the impact. So may we offer each other flexibility and grace when we accidentally or unintentionally hurt or embarrass the other. And may we all grow wiser and more compassionate as we dance and stumble our way along through this bumper car world.
When we think of community, we think of all the relationships there are between us and among us, and all of the things we have in common, and yes, our differences too. As Vanessa Rush Southern says in our reading, with our different backgrounds and experiences and uniqueness, it's inevitable that we'll bump up against one another at times. I never would have thought of bumper cars as a metaphor for community. But I love her image, and I picture a UU congregation, all of us, let's say, being at a carnival, and we all drive our little bumper cars, right? And then having the jarring and kind of unpleasant feeling of bumping into each other, or worse, when somebody comes up behind you and bumps into you. Without warning, even. That's the nature of the game, though. So it's definitely an apt comparison. When I think of community, the image that comes to my mind is webs. And as much as bumper cars can be a little unpleasant, webs can be worse. In fact, I hate webs. Not all webs. You know, it's a certain kind of spider web that I hate. I hate spider webs on my face. So I started thinking about webs, and I started thinking about hiking through the woods. I don't know if any of you have ever been hiking through the woods. Yeah, there you go. She's like, yeah, that's the motion, right? All of a sudden, a web gets you. Ugh. Yuck. I've been a hiker almost all my life. My dad would take us out every weekend for hiking trips, and I can remember many of those spider webby hikes. Ugh. Where we take turns being the first one on the path. Oh, after you, please. Because, of course, whoever goes first is going to get plastered with a web. Yep, so if the leader's smart, though, they'll pick up a big stick and hold it out in front of them. That's another defense tactic. At least the web will be caught by a stick instead of it glomming onto their face and neck, and ugh. Oh, I can just feel it. I don't even like breaking a spider's web, so there's that aspect of it too, because, you know, she probably worked hard to create that beautiful web, and I just ruined it. I love and respect nature, and I always feel a little bit bad, but I guess the spider doesn't mind. It just goes back to work to rebuild it, and that's the way of nature: creation and destruction and recreation. all part of the cycles of the earth. I think of spider webs as a metaphor for community because our relationships in community are like a web with many connections running through it. And like spider webs in the woods, those connections sometimes get broken. And sometimes we end up feeling pretty yucky when we walk into those unexpected webs in our path. To Vanessa Southern's wondering in our reading, I say yes, we do need to talk more in our communities about how we handle the unintended hurts and slights that we inevitably deal one another. Being part of a religious community is something that matters a lot to us. At their best, these are special places that offer us a trusting environment where we can express our thoughts and feelings, share our stories, and together try to make a difference in each other's lives. As author and earth-centered practitioner Starhawk has written, community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us when we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing. A circle of friends. Someplace where we can be free. This is what we hope for in our communities. And like many important things about adult life, most of us don't receive much instruction about how to have healthy relationships and how to create and maintain a healthy, supportive community, what we often call the beloved community. In the past, most UUs believed that by using the principle of the inherent worth and dignity of every person to form the basis for our relationships, we'd be able to get along in our church communities. This belief in the inherent worth and dignity is one of the original principles that was adopted at the time of the merger of the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1961. But eventually it became clear that this guideline for our relationships wasn't enough. We sometimes became so open and accepting that bizarre situations developed. I heard there was a UU church where someone spiked the coffee hour punch with a little LSD. It was just a little. Quite a few people drank that punch, including a few children. When the person who did this was identified, he was politely asked not to do it again. Well, it happened a second time. And he was asked again not to do it, but it kept happening. And I don't know how long this went on, but members of the congregation were torn because they were trying to respect this man's inherent worth and dignity. So some UUs began to realize there had to be limits on what kind of behavior was acceptable. Policies that outlined how to handle disruptive behavior began to be added to board documents, and a movement began to encourage congregations to adopt behavioral covenants, a covenant of healthy relationships, or a covenant of right relations, which is what we have here at UUFN. And we're going to be reviewing this document a little bit later. A covenant like this is a big step toward true community, where we consider the needs of everyone. It reflects a conscious desire to deepen trust in a community. Yeah, you'd like to be able to trust that your punch isn't contaminated with LSD, for one thing. But anyway, it's a way of setting limits on what's acceptable. One of my colleagues has observed that too many congregations still allow damaging behavior to happen in the name of personal freedom. It's important for a congregation to be able to say, when necessary, we're not going to allow that. The priority always needs to be the health and the well-being of the congregation as a whole, over the needs of one or two who are engaging in harmful behavior. A covenant creates intentionality. It outlines our best intentions for how we want to interact with each other. And it sets common expectations. A covenant typically calls members to listen attentively, express gratitude, value confidentiality, ask for help, respect different opinions, and acknowledge that everyone makes mistakes. But what about those mistakes? What about when that web of relationships gets torn? What happens when someone says or does something or fails to say or do something and we feel hurt or angry? Most of us, unless we've gone out of our way to take a class or a training, we were never taught how to respond in healthy ways to this kind of situation. And our families were not always the best models because they usually weren't taught healthy ways of addressing conflict either. As Southern says, the truth is each one of us has things that hurt or annoy or embarrass us, end quote. And unless we're perfect, each of us is occasionally thoughtless, inconsiderate, or just unaware. We have our ideals and our best intentions, but no one of us is perfect. We all have off days, whether we're a little clueless or feeling especially vulnerable or sensitive or maybe grouchy. The hurts, the misunderstandings, the moral failures, the interpersonal conflicts, these are all part of the natural cycles of human relationships. Just like nature, just like the spider whose web gets torn and it needs to be repaired. Writer and Francis Coviar says, when covenant breaks, hope flickers and doubt seeps in like floodwaters through the cracks in the basement. We are left staring at the door that was slammed in our face, wondering if we should walk back in and why. But then something shifts. Covenant is a promise between the people of this faith, but it is also a promise between ourself and our faith. And sometimes nothing takes more faith than staying. In my own life, I didn't learn much about handling conflict except maybe how to avoid it. But once I became a minister, I needed to learn because addressing and resolving conflict is part of congregational life, and so it's part of ministry. In the first congregation I served, I remember the chair of the Sunday Services Committee writing me an angry letter, taking issue with the fact that I'd made a decision about something that he thought I had no right to decide. I don't remember exactly what the issue was, but this man had a lot of power in the congregation, and he could turn a lot of people against me. You know, he could even force me out of the church. I didn't believe that what I had done was wrong, but I was worried that I'd made an enemy out of this man. As it was, he had never really warmed up to me. So as I said, this was my first ministry, and I had a mentor advisor, and she suggested that I apologize, even if I wasn't wrong. So I had to swallow my pride. But what she said was it might take the wind out of his sails. Okay, well, I like that idea. So when I met with Jim, he clearly expected me to defend myself, which is what I really wanted to do. My heart was pounding. I took a deep breath, and I said, I'm really sorry, Jim. I didn't realize you would feel this way, so I apologize. Well, the anger, you should have seen the anger. It just drained right out of his face. And I watched his expression turn into one of surprise and then relief and gratitude. Well, thank you, he said. And that day I learned a beautiful lesson about the power of apology. Not only did we resolve our conflict, but because of this exchange, we developed a warmer and friendlier relationship. And I felt that he trusted me, or maybe respected me in a way that he hadn't before. Since then, I've taken trainings in conflict resolution. I still really like conflict about as much as I like getting a spider web across my face. Who doesn't, right? But now I have tools that I can use. And I know from experience that with a few words, sometimes a conflict can be transformed into a powerful moment of understanding and forgiveness. And it can bring two people closer together than they ever would have been otherwise. In a weird way, it can actually be a bonding experience. In general, most Unitarian Universalists don't like conflict either. We have a common pattern in many of our congregations. Someone will get their feelings hurt. They may feel criticized or unappreciated. And then they leave. They don't know how to face the person who hurt them, so they avoid confrontation by withdrawing. It happens over and over again. We've probably all seen it. This was the pattern at the UU congregation in the Poconos I served for 10 years. Something would happen and the person would just leave. We also had a fair amount of triangulation going on. That's where you're angry or you're hurt about what somebody said or did, or maybe they failed to say or do, and you go tell somebody else about it, but you never actually talk to the original person who upset you. Over time, I was able to help them understand how triangulation ultimately creates problems rather than solving them. I taught them how to engage in the practice of compassionate listening. They came to realize that they now had ways of addressing conflict directly with another person. So sometimes they'd come to me and ask me to mediate so they could each feel listened to by the others in a safe place. Sometimes they'd work it out by themselves. This congregation had an active theater group, and one summer while I was on vacation, they had a dispute about whether it was okay for an actor to wear a Native American headdress. And by the way, the general consensus among Native Americans is that wearing a headdress is reserved strictly for ceremonial use by Native Americans. When I got back from my vacation, of course, I didn't know anything about what was going on during the summer. I got back from my vacation, members of the congregation were excited to tell me about this conflict. Right, that's a little bit odd. Well, they wanted to tell me what they did. They'd held several meetings, and they listened respectfully to each side. Ultimately, they all agreed that the actor would not wear the headdress. They were very proud of themselves, and I was proud of them too. People stopped leaving when they got upset. Sometimes, as Koviar writes, nothing takes more faith than staying. And they now have that faith that they can work through the hurt. Author Brene Brown says that she's not sure there's a braver sentence than saying, "That really hurt my feelings." You know, we're already feeling emotionally wounded and we're afraid to be vulnerable. But when we share our hurt feelings and we try to reconnect without anger, more often than we might expect, the other person will respond positively. Even better, when we begin by asking them to explain what they said or did, we might then understand their perspective better. And then we might hurt less, and it's easier to share that tender feeling with them. When covenant breaks, says Koviar, it is a tear merely in a web still holding strong. As long as we believe in the possibility of repair, of what we can become together, where we can be welcomed whole without the need to hide any part of who we are. As long as we believe in this place of belonging, we can come back. And like the spiders out there in the woods, we can just start weaving again. And what we then create may be more beautiful than ever. May it be so. Okay, and I promised you, I think, that we were going to take a look at our covenant. So we're going to put that up on the screen for you. And I need a volunteer to read read the first line on our covenant, and Maria is going to come forward with her handheld mic. So would somebody in the front row volunteer to read the first line? Okay. All right. So, first of all, how many of you are aware that this covenant exists? Oh, that's good. Very good. And if you didn't, that's okay too, because now we're going to talk about this. So I'm going to ask Susan to read the first statement, and then you can pass the mic to the next person. If they don't want to do it, they can pass it to the next person, and so forth, until we've read all the statements.
From We Promise?
Yep. So we promise,
We promise to treat each other with respect, acceptance, and compassion.
We promise to assume the good intentions of others.
We promise to maintain clear and open communication, even with those with whom we have differences.
We promise to take personal responsibility for informing ourselves about the affairs of the congregation.
We promise to respect each other's privacy and confidentiality.
We promise to honor each other's individuality in diversity.
We promise to be generous with our time, talent, and money.
We take responsibility for the viability of the congregation.
We promise to celebrate.
All right. That's a beautiful document, and that was created 13 years ago. Was anybody involved in creating that? Oh, it's wonderful. And who remembered all of the words in that covenant? Yeah, well, it's going a little too far. Yeah, that's okay. Of course you didn't remember everything. That's okay. We're in the process of scheduling community conversation so we can talk more about what the statements actually mean in practice. Because, as we said, covenants are statements of our intentions. They're aspirational. Because we don't really know, based on these, the practices. What do we actually say when, for example, our feelings are hurt? How do we respond when we realize we've accidentally hurt someone? How do we phrase things so that we don't raise another person's defenses? There's so much to the art of healthy communication. So we'll explore when we get together at some Sunday in the future, to be announced whenever we figure that out. But we'll talk about some of the how-tos of maintaining and repairing our covenantal agreements. And, we do learn things along the way. I'm sure you've figured out a few things too. So I look forward to hearing some of your wisdom. I did a similar kind of workshop at another congregation, and I asked for what people have learned along the way about conflict. And I love what this one person said. He said, well, the thing you want to say is usually not the thing you should say. Right? So we do learn things along the way. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings.